The New York Rangers have landed Mike Sullivan, but David Carle remains the real head coaching prize.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked B. Today is Friday, May 2nd. I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by the Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Turn any TV into your Xbox. No console needed. Head to amazon.com/firetv locked on to learn more. On today's episode of Locked On Boston Bruins, we are going to discuss the New York Rangers hiring Mike Sullivan as their new head coach and how David Carle still remains the top choice for the Boston Bruins despite missing out on Charlie McAvoy's father-in-law. We'll also discuss going with a new voice over retread, and also some other new voices that could be candidates behind the bench. Before we get into all that, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins, and you can find me, my hockey thoughts, dad jokes, at Ian C. McLaren. I am a lifelong Boston Bruins fan. Been covering this team for various outlets for 20 years. Was a full-time hockey news writer at thescore.com for 5 years and have been hosting this podcast since 2019. Everydayers will remember that earlier this week I discussed the Pittsburgh Penguins and Mike Sullivan parting ways and discussing whether or not he would be a good fit for the Boston Bruins. He has a couple Stanley Cups on his resume, and he is Charlie McAvoy's father-in-law, coached Team USA. He has been scooped up by the New York Rangers. And with that coming about, it's my contention that David Carle's resume is elite, and he is the most coveted coach in hockey right now. Not even in the NHL quite yet, but the Boston Bruins should be doing everything they can to entice him to move on from the University of Denver. David Carle has 2 NCAA titles with Denver, 2 gold medals at the World Juniors. He is very young, only 35 years old, but his resume is one that gets you excited about where the Boston Bruins could be going as a team rebuilding, retooling. Carle is a modern communicator, emotionally intelligent, tactically sharp. This is kind of what Jim Montgomery was supposed to be, but younger and with more upside. Carle was, of course, an assistant under Montgomery at the University of Denver. I don't know if his relationship with Montgomery and how Monty's time with the Bruins ended would have any bearing on whether or not Carle wants to leave Denver to come to Boston. But this is the kind of coach you build a new identity around, especially if you're investing in your young core. Now, there are conflicting reports as to whether he wants to leave Denver. Don Sweeney last week, of course, said in the search for a new head coach, they were looking for someone with NHL experience. Maybe not as a head coach, but at least some NHL experience, which Carle, of course, does not have. But at the same time, you have to take some risks. And while Sweeney didn't mention Carle in his end of the season availability, and he did say the next candidate should have some NHL on it, Carle is a hot name among coaching searches, and for good reason. Like, he has the kind of upside and experience that you want for a team that's looking to kind of reinvent itself here. He reportedly withdrew from Chicago's search, but that doesn't necessarily mean he is returning to the college ranks. Maybe he just saw Chicago as being too much of a project, but it's so easy to understand the interest in him. Again, 35-year-old, led the Pioneers to 2 national championships in the last 4 years, 2 back-to-back gold medals at the World Juniors in 2024 and 2025 for Team USA. The winning pedigree is evident. If he decides to return to Denver, he'll still be coveted by NHL teams a year from now. He doesn't need to rush a move to the pros, and he can be kind of picky about the opportunities presented to him. But at the same time, if a team like the Bruins comes in and blows him away with an offer, then it certainly is something that he should consider. You get the opportunity to coach a David Pastrnak. You get the opportunity to coach a Charlie McAvoy, a Jeremy Swayman, and others who could step in and help turn this team around very, very soon. Think of the players that he has helped develop at the University of Denver. Most recently, of course, there was the boom of the Minnesota Wild, Bobby Brink, who has become a big member of the Philadelphia Flyers, and of course, all the junior players that he coached over the past couple of years at the World Juniors. This is an exciting hire that could be made possible by the Boston Bruins. Yes, it would have been nice to have Mike Sullivan, who apparently was wined and dined by the New York Rangers and has been given one of the most lucrative contracts in NHL history for a head coach. Chris Drury said Sullivan has established himself as one of the premier head coaches in the NHL, given his numerous accomplishments throughout his career, 2 cups, leading Team USA at the international level. Mike brings a championship-level presence behind the bench. He was considered the most sought-after coach on the market after his split with the Penguins. And, of course, 7 vacancies, including one in Boston, remain across the NHL now that the Rangers have hired Sullivan. Sullivan would have been kind of a slam dunk pick for the Boston Bruins, seeing as he has that winning pedigree. He has that relationship with Charlie McAvoy, would have brought him home to his daughter and grandson. But I maintain that David Carle would be the most exciting name for Don Sweeney and Cam Neely to pursue because of his ceiling being higher. He's younger. He's a guy that hasn't been burned out by the NHL grind just yet. His teams play fast, responsible hockey. System would translate perfectly to the NHL. He's known for structure, discipline, adaptability, and accountability. And this, again, is the kind of coach that you can build a new identity around as the Bruins look to build around their young core of Swayman, McAvoy, and Pastrnak, but also try to bring some other guys in like Fabian Lysell and Matt Poitras. Now, if the Bruins want a fresh perspective behind the bench, Carle is the most intriguing name on the board. But what about the alternative? What about going with a coach who's already been through 2 or 3 NHL gigs and has the scars to show for it? We'll discuss some of the candidates that remain in that category and then take a look at some more other first-time potential NHL coaches here as the podcast continues. Did you know your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe or sign in to Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to go. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports NHL 25 to Call of Duty, Black Ops 6, and Avowed as easily as you stream your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple. It's all on your Fire TV. Again, you can get access to all the shows on Netflix, Prime, Disney Plus, Max. Check out Andor. That's what I've been watching lately. All on the Fire Stick 4K device. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller are required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K, Fire TV Stick 4K Max, first and second gen, and the Fire TV Cube third gen. Thank you so much once again for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine, free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today we're talking about Mike Sullivan being scooped by the New York Rangers, David Carle remaining the top choice among NHL coaching candidates. But failing that, who else is out there? Should the Bruins go with a retread or should they go with another first-year option if Carle is indeed intent on staying at the University of Denver? There's a big debate in the NHL as to whether you should keep recycling the same old coaches or give a new guy a shot. Do you want a guy who's been in the trenches for a while, who has succeeded elsewhere, maybe fallen short as well, or do you want to give a fresh voice a chance here? Now, there are certainly a lot of candidates out there that the Bruins could look at if they want to bring in a veteran head coach. There's Peter Laviolette, who Mike Sullivan is replacing in New York. He does check a lot of boxes for Don Sweeney, Massachusetts roots, Stanley Cup winner with the Carolina Hurricanes, has some Bruins ties, but his season with the Rangers didn't exactly inspire confidence. They went from winning the President's Trophy to out of the playoffs. The Bruins had gone from President's Trophy to second round under Jim Montgomery, and then they let him go. So Laviolette's drop with the Rangers even steeper. He works best with teams on the cusp of a championship. Boston probably not quite there. Now, Rick Tocchet is another big name that's out there. He was a Jack Adams winner just 1 year ago. His career coaching record doesn't really scream postseason success. Just 2 playoff appearances in 9 seasons, 1 series win. There's a lot of buzz about him maybe going to Philadelphia or Pittsburgh. He spent a lot of his playing days in both of those cities. A return to Boston, where he had a short stint as a player, seems less likely, but not impossible. And the Canucks, a lot of tumult in Vancouver this past season. So those two are some pretty possible candidates for the Bruins to look at. John Tortorella was another one. We discussed him when his tenure was ended with the Flyers. It's reported that he's going to be joining the Rangers in some capacity. He does have that intense, demanding, proven style, but it may not mesh with the Bruins' apparent desire to emphasize communication with the young players. And based on his comments in Philly that led to him being dismissed, he's not too interested in a rebuild or a retool situation. Claude Julien's name has come up. He, of course, won a cup in Boston in 2011, but he kind of had some of the same issues with young players as is being reported by, with other guys like a John Tortorella. There is, of course, also a guy like Joel Quenneville out there who is getting some love from the Anaheim Ducks, apparently. I'm very reluctant to turn to him because of his history with the Chicago Blackhawks and everything that happened there. The other, Quenneville He's interviewed for the vacancy in Anaheim. If they choose to hire him, you have to deal with all the baggage that comes with bringing him aboard. He was let go by the Panthers because of the way the Blackhawks mishandled sexual assault allegation. Could have been the coach that led the Panthers to these heights that they've been achieving. Paul Maurice came in and did it. He is the second winningest head coach of all time, but you'd have to deal with the backlash. The Bruins were already embarrassed by their mishandling of Mitchell Marner, and not quite the same, but still would be a very unpopular move. And the Bruins do not need that bad PR right now when things are already kind of low for them. One other kind of retread they could consider, or a couple more, would be Gerard Gallant, NHL coach at 4 different spots. He often lifts a team early on, but kind of wears out his welcome quickly. Vegas, New York, most recently, Florida before that. And Bruce Boudreau. Been 2 years since he was head coach in Vancouver, 7 years since he made the playoffs, 10 since his team won a round. He's beloved and could be maybe a good assistant to help with the power play or to help a first-time head coach, but he's not likely to be a top-tier candidate for the Boston Bruins. Where does Carle fit into this? Again, 35 years old, one of the most sought-after college coaches in the country. He doesn't have that NHL experience, a factor Don Sweeney has admitted is a priority, but sometimes the boldest move is the smartest one. We've already seen so many of these guys get multiple opportunities and just flame out. The Bruins have gone the second-time route several times, including Jim Montgomery most recently, Joe Sacco as interim head coach. Claude Julien had been with Montreal in the past. Might be time to break that cycle and look towards the future. So it's Carle versus the vets, upside versus experience. What kind of team does Don Sweeney think he has, and how bold is he willing to be? And is David Carle the only first-time candidate out there? Well, certainly not. And we'll take a look at some of the other first-time head coaching candidates that are available that I would be very much on board with here as the podcast continues. The Stanley Cup playoffs are here, and if you've never been to a live NHL playoff game, it's unlike anything else. The intensity, the speed, the energy in the building, it's next level. And thanks to Game Time, getting in the door is easier and more affordable than ever. It's the fastest way to grab playoff tickets, even for those must-see matchups. Prices actually drop as puck drop gets closer, and with last-minute deals, you can save up to 60%. Their all-in pricing shows the total cost up front, no surprise fees at checkout, and the app even shows you panoramic seat views so you know exactly what you're getting before you buy. With Game Time ticket coverage, you know you're protected, whether it's cancellation protection, job loss assurance, or their 24-hour return guarantee. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, that's code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time, last-minute tickets at the lowest price, guaranteed. All right, today we're talking about Mike Sullivan being hired by the New York Rangers and what other candidates may be out there. Pumping David Carle's tires as the top candidate out there. David Carle versus some of the recycled coaches around there that have been given multiple opportunities. There's also a bunch of other first-time options that the Bruins should look at. Now, Jay Leach is one that jumps out. He's well thought of by the Bruins front office. He's considered a promising future head coach and had been on the radar before Montgomery was hired. He went to Seattle, came back. But do they want to go with a guy who has been with Montgomery, now been with Joe Sacco? He was already on the bench. They might want a new voice coming in. Ryan Mugano has done a terrific job in Providence. Matt Poitras, Fabian Lysell, Frederic Brunet, Georgi Merkulov, the Bruins are hoping could be contributors at the NHL level at some point. Led them to a spot in the AHL playoffs where they're still rolling. I don't know if he's quite ready yet. There's a couple guys that I have discussed before. Everydayers will remember that I'm very, very high on for the Boston Bruins. The first is Marco Sturm, former Bruins forward from Germany, who, of course, well remembered for being part of the Joe Thornton trade, but also scoring the winning goal in the first Winter Classic at Fenway, also dropping the gloves there. He's been a coach on the rise in the Los Angeles Kings organization. He was an assistant for the Kings before taking over as head coach of the Ontario Reign, where he has thrived. And he is a guy, of course, with Bruins ties and who could be a really good candidate to have. He has that NHL coaching experience that Sweeney is after, but also a fresh voice from outside the organization with ties to the Bruins. Could be a very good fit, as could be Marc Savard. He's a former Bruins star, career unfortunately cut short by concussions, and since then he spent some time as a head coach in junior hockey, Windsor Spitfires, coaching Wyatt Johnson, who's developed as a star in Dallas. He's also spent the last 2 seasons as an assistant in Calgary and Toronto. Toronto is where he is currently at. The Leafs advancing to the second round after beating the Ottawa Senators last night. Might be too early to give him an NHL head coaching job, but his connections to Boston make him worth watching, and he does have more experience than a David Carle, and of course was an offense-first guy. And if they're looking to develop offensively and kind of pivot offensively, he's a guy that they certainly should take a look at. Other candidates include Mike Vellucci, 22 years in junior hockey and the minors before Mike Sullivan added him to his staff in Pittsburgh. He was an assistant he's going to be an assistant at the World Championships this summer. He's the sort of guy who, you kind of have to open the doors for an interview, but probably would really impress when he got there. Jay Pandolfo, I've mentioned before. He's a 50-year-old former NHLer from Winchester. Spent 5 years as a Bruins assistant before going to BU. He's been to 3 Frozen Fours in 3 seasons. There is an NHL career ahead of him. His son is likely to be a top recruit a couple years down the road, so perhaps he wants to stick around at BU to coach him, but he is going to be an NHL head coach at some point, and he's a guy to keep an eye on for sure. Another guy you maybe not have heard of, Misha Donskov. He is a Dallas Stars assistant. He was an assistant for Canada at the Four Nations Face-Off. Stars head coach Pete DeBoer told NHL.com he does so many things behind the scenes that help you win. Great at getting your team ready. Great at details. The Stars are heading into a Game 7 against the Avalanche. If they are eliminated, perhaps he'll get some more luck. He could be a candidate. Joel Ward as well, a top assistant on Bruce Cassidy's staff in Vegas in the NHL for more than a decade. He was an assistant for 3 years in the AHL, been in the NHL for the last 2. Kind of inexperienced, would really have to nail the interview. But those are some of the first-time candidates out there. Maybe they go off the board like Montreal did with Martin St. Louis. He had no coaching experience. Maybe they just go, hey, Zdeno Chara, jump on the bench. Patrice Bergeron, you get in there as well. That would be quite something. Personally, I'm kind of torn between the trusted veteran and the first-timer, that whole philosophy, but David Carle is my number one choice. I would love to see Marco Sturm or Marc Savard given the opportunity. Not really keen on a Laviolette or Tortorella for sure. Really hope that the Bruins do not go in that direction here now that Mike Sullivan has been snagged by the New York Rangers. What do you think? Let me know what you think here by commenting. If it's not Carle, what else could they do? Jay Leach, internal familiarity, but has he evolved that much since going to Seattle and coming back? Ryan Mugano, solid in Providence, not mentioned really as a candidate yet. There is a vacuum in leadership and identity right now for the Bruins. They need a coach who can shape both. And right now, they're not just hiring a coach. They're choosing who helps define the next phase of this franchise. If it's not David Carle, then who is the right answer? For me, again, I would love to see a Savard or a Marco Sturm be given that opportunity as former Bruins with some experience, or failing that, maybe Jay Pandolfo as well, if they can pry him out of BU. That is it for today's episode of Locked On Boston Bruins, my friends. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. Thank you for joining me on the podcast this week. Thank you for making it your first listen. Please do check out Locked On NHL Game Night next. Every game, every night until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. It's available in the Locked On NHL feed on your podcast app and on YouTube. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please do have a great weekend. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we'll talk to you again here on the next episode of Locked On Boston Bruins, bringing you all the latest on the black and gold.